You're probably thinking, no salt, no smoke? That's crazy talk. How do you keep meat fresh without salt or smoke? Doesn't that kind of defeat the whole purpose? Well, yes, we do live in an age of refrigerators and canning technologies and freeze dryers that would put our ancestors to shame. However, even with all those options, sometimes you don't have the luxury of salting, smoking, or freezing your meat. In fact, in the days before refrigeration, salting and smoking were the go-to methods of meat preservation. But some cultures around the world managed to master a completely different approach. One that not only kept meat fresh, but in some cases, allowed them to store it for months. They did this using a natural process called air drying. The process of air drying meat is similar to the way we dry herbs, like oregano or basil, after we've picked them from the garden. You see, when we remove the water from food, we remove the medium through which bacteria and other microorganisms grow. Without water, microbes can't survive. There are 3 main steps involved in air drying meat. First, the meat needs to be thinly sliced, so it dries out quickly. Second, it has to be hung somewhere with plenty of airflow to keep insects and rodents away. And third, the meat must be protected from rain and humidity so it doesn't spoil. Mastering these 3 steps takes knowledge, practice, and a bit of luck. If any one of these elements is off, then the meat will spoil. But when they come together, the results can be astonishing. In parts of South America, Africa, Australia, and Asia, villagers developed unique ways of preserving meat without salt or smoke. Each technique blended local materials with deep understanding of weather and wildlife. It was a long process, but it was worth it. Without salt, they managed to keep meat fresh for weeks or even months. That might sound impossible today, but it's true. It used skills and patience to beat the odds. For example, imagine walking into your refrigerator and finding last year's Thanksgiving turkey still sitting there looking good, or opening your pantry to find a ham from Christmas 2 years ago, still safe to eat. Sounds insane, right? But these folks did it over and over again. They became experts at turning fresh kills into food that could last a season. Every piece of meat was precious. There were no second chances. So they perfected techniques that blended skill, patience, and deep respect for nature. Take the Himba people of Namibia as an example. The Himba are a small ethnic group living in the rugged mountains of northern Namibia. Their traditional way of life is deeply intertwined with their environment, and they've developed unique techniques for air drying meat in their hot, dry climate. One of their secrets is using specific cuts of meat from animals that are higher up in the mountains. These cuts are naturally leaner, which helps them dry out more quickly and reduces the chance of spoilage. Once the meat is cut, they use acacia wood to make a fire underneath their drying racks. This low smoke helps to preserve the meat and add a subtle flavor. The racks are raised above the ground on sturdy poles, which allows for good air circulation and protects the meat from insects and animals. The Himba also use a special cloth made from the fibers of the African mango tree to wrap individual pieces of meat. This wrapping not only helps to protect the meat, but also serves as a way to identify whose meat is whose. The Himba have a deep understanding of their environment, and they take full advantage of the hot, dry conditions to preserve their meat. The rugged terrain and limited vegetation of the mountains play a crucial role in this process. The Himba people have carefully honed their techniques over generations, passing down their knowledge from one generation to the next. This has allowed them to thrive in a harsh environment where traditional methods of meat preservation would not work. Another example is the Kalahari Bushmen of Botswana. The Bushmen are known for their intimate knowledge of the Kalahari Desert and their sustainable use of its resources. One of their ingenious methods of preserving meat without salting or smoking is by burying meat inside hollowed-out logs. This technique not only keeps the meat fresh, but also adds a unique flavor and texture to it. The Bushmen would carefully select the type of log to use based on its size and the amount of meat they needed to preserve. They would then use sharp stones or knives made from animal bones to carve out the center of the log, creating a hollow chamber. The meat would then be placed inside the log, and the ends would be sealed with resin or mud. This creates a sealed environment that prevents the entry of microorganisms and pests, while allowing for slow evaporation of moisture from the meat. The result is a tender, flavorful piece of meat that can last for months. But it's not just about preserving meat. The Bushmen's knowledge of the desert ecosystem extends to every aspect of their lives. They have a deep understanding of the medicinal properties of plants and use them to treat various ailments. They also have a rich oral tradition that preserves their history, culture, and knowledge. Then we have the Australian Aboriginal communities. These communities have a rich history of air-drying meat. And each group had its own unique methods based on the resources available to them. One common technique was to build stone shelters with a roof that sloped downwards to catch and divert away rainwater. The shelters were large enough to hold several carcasses and were often used by multiple families. To prepare the meat, the animals would be butchered and then sliced into thin strips using sharp stone tools. These strips would then be carefully arranged in rows on the stone shelves within the shelters, ensuring that they were not overcrowded. Once the meat was in place, the roof of the shelter would be closed, forming a seal that protected the meat from insects and other animals. The roof was also designed to allow for air circulation, which helped to prevent the growth of mold and bacteria. This technique allowed the meat to dry slowly and evenly, resulting in a product that could be stored for many months. The dried meat could then be rehydrated and used in a variety of dishes, or could be kept on hand for times of scarcity. But the Aboriginal people's knowledge of the land went far beyond just finding food. They had a deep understanding of the medicinal properties of plants and used them to treat illnesses and injuries. They also had a rich culture and history that was passed down through stories and art. So why is this important to us today? Well, as we face challenges like food shortages and climate change, it's helpful to look to the past for inspiration. The techniques used by these cultures to preserve meat without salting or smoking are not only fascinating but also practical. They offer a sustainable and chemical-free way to store food for long periods of time, which could be invaluable in times of need. One of the most impressive aspects of these techniques is their simplicity. They require little more than the natural materials found in the environment and then know how to use them effectively. For example, the Himba people's use of acacia wood to add subtle flavor to their dried meat is a clever way to enhance the taste of their food without introducing artificial ingredients. Similarly, the Australian Aboriginal community's use of stone shelters to dry meat is a low-tech solution to a common problem that can still be relevant today. It's also important to note that these techniques are not just environmentally friendly, but also socially and culturally significant. They are an integral part of the traditions and customs of these indigenous cultures and have been passed down for generations. By learning about and preserving these techniques, we are also helping to protect cultural heritage. Finally, the techniques used by these cultures to preserve meat without salting or smoking are simply fascinating. From the Himba people's use of specific cuts of meat to the Kalahari Bushmen's use of hollowed-out logs, each technique is a testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of these cultures. By studying and understanding these techniques, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the challenges they overcame and the solutions they developed. In conclusion, the techniques used by ancient villagers to preserve meat without salting or smoking are a remarkable feat of human ingenuity. In the face of challenges like food shortages and climate change, it's essential to look to the past for inspiration and learn from the techniques that have stood the test of time. By embracing sustainable and chemical-free methods of food preservation, we can ensure that we are protecting our planet and our cultural heritage for future generations. So let's raise a glass to the Himba people, the Kalahari Bushmen, the Australian Aboriginal communities, and all the other cultures that have preserved these invaluable traditions. And let's remember that sometimes the oldest ways are the best ways.